Okay, so God willing, this time it's going to be a Q&A session based on the questions that have been submitted. Um, does everyone have the link if they want to submit more questions? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to just go through these questions, and then again, feel free to ask any questions you want. Hopefully we'll have time for everything. I don't know. We have how many questions? We have 10 questions. Okay. So the first question is, what have you seen to be the most detrimental of parent behaviors to the spiritual and emotional health of a child? I mean, there are several things I think that can have both short-term and long-term effect on children, and sometimes we get stuck in a cycle or a pattern where we try to deal with like short-term problems with short-term solutions, but those short-term solutions can sometimes have a long-term negative impact. Like just one example is like when we're constantly yelling at our children. If we're yelling at them because they're doing something wrong and we want to stop them immediately from doing that wrong thing, it's a lot of times it's effective. It's a kind of like intimidation. Like the children are stopped because of our strong reaction to what they're doing, and it can appear that it's effective because we get them to do what we want. But if we find ourselves having to do that all the time, and we're always yelling at our kids to get them to do what we want, then it can have a long-term negative impact. It can make them more aggressive. It can make them to also start yelling when they want things, whether they want things from us or they want things from other kids, and it can escalate at that point. And while it's very difficult, maybe in those moments where our kids are doing the wrong thing or we're trying to control them, but again, like thinking of what is the long-term solution versus short-term solution, I think is very important. That's something that can have a negative impact. Authoritarianism in general. Authoritarianism is pretty much saying that only the voices of the adults matter, right? Like the adults decide everything. Only the things that the adults want is what goes. Now, definitely, like obviously the adults have a lot more experience and knowledge and understanding of the world, so that they are going to make the decisions, all right? Especially for the younger kids. But it's good to get input from your kids, even if you're not going to do what they say. Of course, depends on the age of the kids, but like, or at least give them some kind of choice, even if the choice is kind of insignificant, even if it's not going to make any difference at all in terms of like your plan or what needs to be done. Make them feel like they are participating in something, and it's not just like a top-down hierarchy where the parents are deciding everything and then the kids are just kind of following whatever the parents say. Instead, like, yes, we're going to go to this place, we're going to go on this vacation, we're going to do this, but would you like, to do this or to do that? Something that's kind of neutral to you, something that's really insignificant to you, but it makes the kids feel like they are participating in some kind of decision making. Having very, very strict rules. Also, this would be a sign of authoritarianism, where the rules are very punitive, where there's little understanding, where there's little exceptions depending on the situation. This can also lead to kids having like anxiety or low self-confidence if they're always getting in trouble, like all the time. And I understand that sometimes kids are, they do get in trouble a lot because they disobey, and they kind of want to do their own thing. So it would be good to give them tasks and things that they are able to do well as well, so that we find a reason to praise them. Sometimes with authoritarian parents, the reason they become that way is because their kids are always disobeying. But it could be that they're disobeying because we're giving them things, we're having an expectation of them that's too high for their age level. Maybe that's one thing. And we're not necessarily balancing it out with like positive reinforcement. Like, okay, like, yes, we have these rules and these rules are important and we should follow them, but it shouldn't all be just about here are the rules and then when you break the rules, there's punishment. there should also be like positive rewards whenever they do something good. And sometimes we have to make up things that they can do, little things, to give them a reward. Like, think of like the way that God does with us is like we do a lot of things wrong, but God wants to reward the littlest thing. He wants to reward us for the small things that we do to kind of show that like He loves us and He cares about us. So children don't understand that the rules that we're setting for them are a sign of love, right? Like obviously we're doing it because we want to protect them, we want to help them. Kids don't necessarily understand this. They just see that we are hindering them from doing what they want. And unless the parents have a good relationship with the kids, this could lead to them actually hating the parents. So it's good to have a balance in kind of the type of rules that we set, depending on the relationship that we have, not being too punitive. This is one thing that could have a long-term effect on the kids. But the opposite is also true, like being very permissive. Having very little structure, no consequences. Whenever the kids make a mistake, we're always like trying to cover the mistake. We're trying to undo the mistake. Where we make exceptions. We don't give them the consequences that we said that we were going to give them. And in this way, like the kids, they don't learn responsibility. They don't learn that like their actions have consequences. And even though, again, maybe this is being done by the parent out of love, out of a desire to want the child to succeed and not to experience the negative consequences of their actions, but again, in the long term, it causes the child to not be responsible. No matter what I do, someone is going to come and save me. Someone is going to come and undo what it is that I've done. Another type of behavior, parenting behavior, is neglectful parenting. This is like when the parents are emotionally unavailable or physically unavailable to the kid. They don't provide a lot of guidance or nurturing. They're not really involved in the day-to-day life of the child. They're not really interested to hear about what happens to the child at school. They kind of want everything to run on automatic without investing the amount of time necessary to really like parent their kid. And so the kid is kind of more or less forced to rely on themselves more than they really should be at that age. Now definitely there is independence that we want to teach our children over time to be able to do things on their own, instead of relying on the parents to do them. Like, you know, at a certain age when our children are able, we want them to be able to dress themselves. We want them to be able to even like as they get older, like heat up their own food and like that's good. That's independence. But there's a kind of level of kind of distance that the parents have that maybe the children are not able to do something or cope with something on their own, and they need the presence of the parents, the help of the parents to do. And if they feel helpless, and they're always feeling like they're having to just fend for themselves and no one is really there to guide them or to help them in what they're doing, this can make them feel like they are neglected. And so this is another type of like parenting problem that can happen. And a lot of times it happens when the parents are under a lot of stress, they're very busy, they have very difficult work hours. For whatever reasons, they are not as physically present, or even though they are physically present, but they're mentally checked out. They just want to rest and relax. They had a hard day and they want to just rest. They don't really want to give much time to the parents, and we give the iPad to them as the way to calm them down and say, here, just watch whatever you want to watch. And again, there's nothing wrong with watching, but it has to be done in a balanced way and not just for hours and hours and hours every day. And that's like all the interaction that the children have is with the iPad, for instance, in the evening, on any given day. That can have a negative impact on the kids. Another parenting behavior that can have negative impact is if the parents are fighting all the time, especially when the parents are fighting in front of their kids. But even when they're not fighting in front of the kids can sense that there's something wrong. The kids can sense that there's no harmony between the parents whenever they are fighting. And so if this is something that's happening a lot, it can have a long-term impact on the kids, and making them feel like there's no security in the home. Like the home is not a stable place. It's not a safe place. It's not a peaceful place. It's a place that maybe I don't want to be. I don't want to be there because there's always tension there. Or kids are just going to escape it and just go in their room and stay in their room and find something else to do in their room, kind of separate, as though it's like a separate place from the rest of the house, because the house is not a place that they really want to be. Also, this can lead to anxiety, can make them always feel nervous about coming home or being at home. And so definitely the interaction between the mom and the dad at home is very important, and being always kind of as much as we can speaking to each other with respect, with calmness. Even when we disagree, it's okay for the kids to see that we disagree about things sometimes, and then they see that we resolve it in a respectful way. This actually helps them feel like, okay, it's okay to have disagreement, but when we disagree, we are respectful, we are calm, we compromise. All those things are actually things they can learn from us when done correctly. We shouldn't disagree about how we discipline the kids or parenting principles in front of them, though, right? So like they need to see that mom and dad are like, when it comes to the rules of the house, they are like one. There's not two different opinions. There's not, I think this and I think that. If when it comes to like, okay, like our kid did something wrong or we're trying to do something related to the child, we should have that conversation in private, and then come back with a unified opinion, a unified like directive of what is it that we should be doing with the kids. Because apart from like if we don't do that, then they're gonna like identify the parent that is most likely the one to grant them what they want. And we've all experienced that, where the kids go to one parent that they think is going to give them what they want, and maybe that parent would give it to them while the other parent would disapprove. And so it's very important that the parents are on the same page. And even like if the child comes and asks one of them, can I have this? And the other one, and the parent is not really sure what the other parent thinks, you say, well, I'll talk to your dad or I'll talk to your mom, and we'll decide. Okay, that way the kids always feel like they are, that the parents are always on the same page. Another kind of detrimental behavior that we see is parents that lecture their kids but without modeling good behavior. So for instance, we tell the kids everything that they should be doing, and maybe the things we tell them to do are right and good, but they don't see those same behaviors in us. So we tell them, oh, we need to go to church, but we don't go to church. We tell them that we need to read the Bible, but we don't read the Bible. We tell them that we shouldn't curse, but they hear us cursing, right? Those things reinforce in their mind that what we're supposed to do and what we do is two different things, right? And they're not learning from us because they see that we don't follow our own guidance. We don't follow our own, command that we're trying to give them. And this makes them feel like religion and faith and morality is all about just like the external appearance. Like in front of people, we appear a certain way, but the reality is something very different. So we should definitely be thinking about how to model the right behaviors. That's more important than telling them the right things to do. Telling them the right things is good, but if it's not backed up by our own actions, then this can have, again, a long-term negative effect on them. Of course, abusive behavior of all types, this can have a negative impact on them, whether it's physically or verbally. Abusing our kids, like telling them that they are bad, telling them that they like making them feel like they are inherently bad. Like not just that the action that they did was bad, but that they themselves are inherently bad. It's something that they will struggle with. They will struggle with their identity and who they are. And they will think that they themselves, like something is wrong with them. And definitely going back to the authoritarianism, if the majority of time when we're interacting with our kids, it's all just telling them, don't do this, don't say this, why did you do that, punishment for this, right? Not to say that those punishments and consequences aren't necessary, but if that's the only interaction we have or the primary interaction we have with them, then this will be our role in their eyes. Like they won't see us as friends, they won't see us as on their side, they will just see us as, dictators that have to be followed for fear of what will happen if they don't. And then the moment that they are old enough in order not to have to follow these rules anymore, they won't. And they'll be very rebellious, and they'll be rebellious against authority in general. So it's very important to be mindful of that. All of the things that I mentioned, and of course there's a lot more, like what are some of the things that can lead to in kids? So they can have a negative self-perception and low self-esteem if we're always telling them they're bad all the time, if we're always punishing them all the time. Control issues, right? They can want to push their limits and their boundaries because they want to breathe. They want to have space, and so they're always trying to get away with something. They're always trying to see whether something they can get away with it, and without the parents knowing, or really without any authority knowing. they actually could have a higher likelihood of breaking the law, because again, the law to them is something oppressive, because that's the experience that they had in the home. Difficulty forming meaningful relationships, antisocial behavior. All these are kind of things that maybe can come about with, like, all of these in a very, very long-term way. Now, maybe all of us have struggled with this at some point. The fact that we struggle with it once or twice or here and there is not the issue. The issue is if you have long-term, consistent, negative behavior like this that affects the kids on a daily basis. So it's not like, okay, well, I lost my temper one time, or, you know, I was very authoritarian one time, or I was neglectful one time, or permissive one time. That's not going to cause this. This is going to be if you have a very repeated pattern. So we look at kind of our home situation. We look at, how healthy it is, and we make decisions based on how we want to change it. If we want to change it, how it should be changed. That things that would have a much bigger impact on our kids than just like a one-time event. Okay. The second question is, if you notice your child is doing something ungodly or struggling with something, what are ways you can approach them without making them feel judged? One important thing is that the kids have to always see that we're human beings, right? Like, we also struggle, right? Maybe they don't see the struggle, they don't understand the struggle. Like, a lot of kids think their parents never sin. You know, they think their parents never cry. Their parents never do anything wrong, right? Because maybe in their mind, the parent is like a godlike figure, and he's the one or she's the one that's doling out punishment and consequence and all that, and the parent is somehow perfect, right? But if the child sees that the parent has their own struggles, they don't have to know the details of that struggle. They don't have to know the sins that we commit. They don't have to know like all the stresses that are on us. But to make them feel like, you know what, like, I also struggle with things, and I also struggle to do the right thing, and sometimes I don't do the right thing. And what is it that you do, and how is it that you repent, and how is it that you apologize, and how is it that you do these things? Of course, they have to see that with them as well. Like, whenever we maybe become angry at them when we really shouldn't, that we would apologize to them. This will make them see that we are human beings, like we are like them. We are not perfect. And so this will help them to see that like, we are not just judges. We are not just people who are coming to judge their behavior and to tell them that what they're doing is wrong. And this will motivate them to try to struggle more, to overcome whatever weaknesses they have, when they know that they're not alone in this. Okay, so I think this is a very important point. Like, we are teaching them by sharing with them that we are not so different than them. Maybe the things we struggle with are different. The types of things we struggle with are different, but the struggle is the same. It's the same struggle. The human weakness is the same weakness, and I think if they understand that, then it'll make it much easier for them to relate to us and their own struggle. Number 3, how should a couple navigate conflict between themselves in front of their children? So we mentioned this a little bit. Number 1 is address the conflict and don't avoid it. So, like, when there is a conflict, like, we shouldn't just avoid the conflict. When the couple becomes avoidant and they just avoid interacting with each other whenever there's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, even though it might feel at the beginning like you're avoiding a fight, but over time you're growing apart, because you're just avoiding talking to each other and instead growing further and further apart while not resolving the core issue, and it's going to bring up resentment and anger that's going to come out one way or the other at some point. So the first is definitely, like, don't avoid the conversation. The second is speak privately, like we mentioned, right? Speak privately. Don't do it in front of the children. You know, sometimes it's hard because you're emotional and something just happens that bothers you and you want to deal with it immediately, but it's not good to try to deal with it immediately. It will cause conflict and problems in front of your children, and definitely will affect them. So you could tell them, can we speak about this privately, if they're available to do it right then. If not, then okay, can we talk about it later? Okay. Again, there are times where maybe a decision can be deferred until we've had that conversation, or maybe you just have to allow the thing that you don't like to happen. If you're right in the middle of it, and there's no other option to talk about it kind of away from your children, and then deal with it afterward, or at least you can like maybe prevent it from happening again in the future. But having these conflicts in front of our kids, definitely, like I said, it can make them feel insecure. Like I said, don't contradict each other. So this conversation, this back and forth conversation, should be something that's done in private. And if you are going to talk about something and disagree about something in front of them, definitely do it in a respectful way. Like, don't yell, don't name call or insult or lose your temper. You have to be very, very careful, because again, like, the children see the parents as the source of stability. The source of stability in the house and the family. If the parents lose it, then that means the children definitely are going to feel anxious and nervous, because they are not feeling like there's any stability in that relationship. And so try to avoid doing any of this in front of the children. What are the best ways to recover when you raise your voice or make a parenting mistake? So the first thing is, if you recognize that you've made a mistake or that you did something you shouldn't have done, is you can apologize to your kids. Kids are usually very forgiving to the parents, especially when you come to them and you say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said this, I shouldn't have done this. It's something that they will be able to receive. Also, this will help them to understand that it's important to apologize whenever we do something wrong. It also makes them see, again, like we mentioned before, like they can relate to you, because now they see like you're also fallible. There's something you didn't do right, and this is how you're going to respond by trying to make it right. Don't you can even explain whenever it is that this happens. You can explain, what exactly did I do wrong? Like, don't just say I'm sorry. Say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said this to you in this situation. So it teaches them exactly what's wrong. Like, what is it that's wrong? What is it that I did wrong? And that way, whenever they do the same wrong thing, it's like a lesson you've taught them. Like, it's something that they can learn, and they can model after your behavior. What is it that you are doing? Again, don't talk to your children when you're angry. Also, don't try to discipline them when you're angry. When you try to discipline your kids when you're angry, usually the discipline ends up being kind of too much. It ends up being more than what really the situation deserves, and you're doing it because you're trying to get your anger out, some outlet for your anger, rather than real discipline. The goal of discipline is to teach children, right? To teach children the right way that they should live their life. But when we discipline our children when we're angry, maybe our motivation is not really to discipline our children, but our motivation is to just get out the anger that we have, and they obviously are the clear target that of my anger, because they're the ones who made me angry, right? So it's easy for us to like take it out on them because they're at fault. But the issue with parenting is that you're not trying to do something to your kids to satisfy your own emotions, right? Like, your emotions is separate from parenting. Parenting is what is best for the child. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with how I feel, right? If I'm disciplining my kids to satisfy my own feelings, to feel better, to feel like I've taken it out on the person who caused me stress or anxiety or pain or whatever, that's not good parenting. Parenting is all about, what do I have to do to make the kids learn a good principle and a right principle? I have to deal with my own emotions, kind of like when you're at work and you're dealing with people who maybe upset you, right? You have to deal with your own emotions, right? At work, you can't go and punish people because they're adults, right? So for children, we sometimes feel like, well, because they're weak and vulnerable and I have authority over them, I can punish them in a way to make myself feel better about the situation. But that's not right, right? We should focus on what is good for the kid, not on what is good for me. And so don't try to discipline them when you're angry. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, again, as the parent, and you are teaching them the lesson. So something just happened, okay? And let's say they spill their food on the ground after you told them so many times, stop playing with your food. Okay, and so you are angry at what happened, and like you yell at them, maybe a little too much about what is it that's happened, and then after you calm down, you think, okay, I shouldn't have done that. So you're gonna go to your kid and say, I just want to let you know that even though you did the wrong thing because you played with your food when I told you not to, and you see the outcome of it was that the food fell on the ground, I still shouldn't have yelled at you the way that I did. But I also want you to apologize because of the wrong thing that you did. You're teaching them. Again, like, your role is to teach them when is it to apologize. So you're teaching them through speaking to them about it. You're teaching them through your example. And if they don't apologize in the end, okay, maybe you'll get the next one. But at least they're going to see that you are consistently apologizing when you've done something wrong, and you've told them that this is a good opportunity for you to apologize. Like, this is the right time, like, for them to understand when an apology should be given, right? Like, I disobeyed my parents, I should apologize. Actually, they should apologize even if the food didn't fall on the ground. Like, the food falling on the ground was just like the bad outcome of their disobedience. But sometimes there can be disobedience without necessarily a bad outcome. But still, like, this is a good opportunity to teach them the right principle, because something really clear and obvious happened. But it's okay to apologize even when they don't apologize, as long as you're making it clear, like, this is the time you should apologize, and then if they don't apologize, maybe you can say, okay, well, maybe you'll be ready to apologize later on. Like, make them feel like there's still something you're expecting from them. Again, we wouldn't obviously do that with other adults, but here you're trying to teach them the principle, so it's okay to do that. Yeah. The principle of apologizing to kids? Well, we're just speaking about now the between the spouses apologizing to each other, or you're talking about apologizing with the kids and the kids apologizing to you, or you're speaking about the husband and the wife apologizing to each other. Okay. So there are some times where people feel like, okay, there was a conflict that happened, and maybe I internally feel like, okay, I shouldn't have done something, or something happened, but then the situation is over, and so I don't go back and revisit it ever again. And so it causes a kind of like there's no closure, right? Because the problem happened and no one took responsibility for it. And we just kind of move on with our lives, and there isn't a sense of, okay, I was wrong. And so when you don't kind of acknowledge that what it is that you've done or your part in this thing, that I was wrong, like, there's a sense of like, well, it could just happen again. Like, I don't know if you've even acknowledged that this is something you shouldn't have done. Is it going to happen again or not? So I would say, number one is with your spouse. You can talk to them and say, okay, I feel like this thing that you did was wrong, and I would appreciate you to apologize when you do something wrong. Also, it doesn't prevent you from apologizing, and again, modeling that behavior. Be like, okay, whenever I did something wrong, I'm going to apologize. So something happened between the two of you, then you say, okay, I'm sorry for this part, but I'm not happy or I'm upset because you said this or you did this. So you're kind of like, it's easier for someone to apologize when you've already apologized to them. Maybe this will be a way to, over time, get them to feel more comfortable apologizing. But definitely in the end, as an adult, if they don't feel the need to apologize, and they don't, it's something maybe you could do counseling about if it's something that's causing a big problem. But beyond just suggesting it and asking for it and modeling it, I don't know what else really you could do. It's just to see it and to feel it and to understand it and to be reminded of it. If someone is not used to apologizing, it might take them some time to get used to that. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah, and that's why when Christ says, "Unless you are converted and become like the little children, you will not inherit the kingdom of heaven." I mean, that's, we sometimes we look at children as being the least of us, because they're the least capable, they're the least experienced, they're the least knowledgeable, but actually we're supposed to be like them. We lose that innocence and we lose that humility, and we lose like a lot of those qualities as we get older and become jaded by the world, and busy and kind of like hurt by other people, to where we lose the ability to do that so easily as children do, without even having to be prompted, without even having to be told. That's just who they are. Like they don't hold grudges the way that adults, maybe we hold grudges. And so it's definitely like a quality we can learn from them. And that's another positive parenting skill, is to praise the qualities in them that they have that maybe we ourselves don't have. Like, for instance, if you see that your child is like quick to forgive someone, or you be like, "I'm so proud of you because you are so quick to forgive, and I want to learn this from you." Like, again, making the child feel like they're special, they're important, they have good qualities. They have so many good qualities. We just sometimes, because we're focusing so much on the things that they're doing wrong, we don't take the time necessarily to mention it or to speak about it. But if we did, if we said all the positive things that they do, it will help to have a balanced view of them. It will help us and our relationship with them as parents. It will make them more likely to even follow our guidance whenever we tell them what to do, because they feel loved and appreciated. Like we understand who they are. They're not just automatons that are supposed to follow what we say and that's it. Like we have a deeper relationship with them, and they see that we respect them for who they are, even though maybe they do a lot of things wrong. That's good. Okay, number 5. How do you recommend children to be disciplined? Now, there's so many different ways, and this very much depends on the child and the specifics of it, and like what works for them and what doesn't. But some general principles is definitely have both a positive and negative reinforcement. Don't just focus on the negative reinforcement alone, and don't focus just on the positive reinforcement alone. Also, make a system so that your child knows what are the positive rewards and the negative consequences of their actions beforehand. Don't let it be something that's a surprise, especially if the child, like, let's say, struggles with a specific thing, right? They have a specific weakness that they struggle with. So you can sit with them, right? Instead of being like, every time that it happens, we lose our temper, we get angry, we says, "Don't do this again," and we give them punishment. So instead, we sit ahead of time and say, "Okay, we're gonna, because we know that this is a struggle that you have, okay, and we want to teach you to do the right thing. So we make a system so that if you go a day without doing this thing, then here is the reward you're going to get." And the reward, of course, has to be something specific to the child that the child wants. Of course, something that's not harmful, but something that they want. And if, on any given day, if you do the thing that we're asking you not to do, then there will be some consequence. And again, the consequence has to be, relative to and balanced with the transgression. It can't be something like extreme. This is one of the problems that happens when parents discipline their kids while they're angry, is they give them extreme consequences. Like, it's like, okay, you're grounded for a week. That maybe being grounded for a week is too much. Maybe that's not going to be effective. Of course, the longer that the child goes from the time of the transgression, they begin to forget even linking together what is this punishment for, right? Like, the longer it is, especially for the younger children. So it has to be something that is very specific and timely, associated with the thing that they did wrong. And when you make the system, okay, and one of the very nice things about the system is when you make the system, number one, you're making the system while you're not angry. So you're thinking about it soberly. You're thinking like, okay, what makes sense? What is a good balance between the negative and the positive and so on? And then at that point, when the child disobeys and does the wrong thing, it's kind of like the system is the parent. At that point, the parenting part of the decision making is already done. You're not even the bad guy anymore, because the child has already acknowledged and agreed to this system from before. So at that moment, when the bad things happen, you are not really the punisher. You're not the one who's coming up with the punishment. They already know what the punishment is. You're just the one who enforces it. You're the one who carries it out and is consistent with it. To say, okay, well, because you did this, then what we agreed to is such and such has to happen. And that's it. Like, it's even out of your hands at that point. Like, it's not even something that is within your power to change, because we already agreed to the system. It's like the law of the house, right? And I'm not going to go and violate the law of the house. So that's a lot of the benefits that we get from making a system like that. And the child knows ahead of time. And this, even though it might not work from the first or second time, but over time, having a system like this creates a lot of stability in the house, creates a lot of our children to understand what to expect. It takes the stress and the pressure off of the parents, because they're not having to decide how to deal with every situation as it arises. They've already thought it out. They've already thought about it, and they're going to carry it out. Being consistent here is the most important thing. And don't create a system where it's very hard for you to carry it out and follow through with it, because if you're not consistent, it has no value at all. If you're not consistent, then the children are just going to game it, and they're going to find a way around it, and they're going to beg, please, please, please. But if we don't budge with all of this, no matter how many times they say please, no matter how much they cry, no matter what, and we carry out the system, then we'll find that it works. Our children are like master manipulators. They know exactly how to get what they want from us and how to keep pushing our buttons until we give in. Right? So the role of the parent in this is, once the system is set up, you never give in. It's not to say that there can't be exceptions, but the exceptions have to be based on the parent's judgment. So for instance, if, let's say, you have a law in your house where, children have to be in bed by, say, 9 p.m. or whatever. But let's say there's a specific day where your child, had some function at school, and it's a Friday, and they did really well on a test or something, and you want to reward them. You can say, you know what, because you were so good, we're going to let you stay up later than normal. Or because I saw, or let's say you give a punishment to them, and you say, okay, you can't use the iPad for 2 days, let's say. But you see that their behavior after the punishment was so good, and you see they've been reformed, and they're doing good, and they're not complaining yet. If you want to reduce that sentence, if you want to reduce that from 2 days to less, that's okay too. You're responding to their behavior. The whole purpose of the system is to encourage good behavior. So if you see that they're starting to have good behavior, maybe as a parent you can say, you know what, I've decided, because that you've been having good behavior, that we're going to modify this consequence. We're going to cut it short, right? But not if it's prompted by them. And you could even say that. It's if you ask me to do that, it's never going to change if you ask me. But if I see that you're doing a good job myself, maybe that's something that I decide to do. When punishing your kids, don't take away essentials. Don't tell them, okay, you're going to go to sleep without dinner. I mean, dinner is an essential. You have to have food, right? So that's going beyond a punishment based on what they desire. That's their need, right? Don't take away from them something that they need. Take away something that they desire, that's not essential for them. So again, we could talk about this a lot more. There's a lot of more specifics. It really kind of depends on the person and the child and everything. But these are just some general guidelines. Yes. So with money, it kind of depends. So for instance, my view is, if you're asking the kids to do, let's say, chores, I know people that do it both ways. Some will give money and some won't. My personal opinion is, I don't like giving money for chores, because I think that when you're living in a house with people, the idea of doing chores is not, it's something that's expected of you. right? Like it's something that and you should do it as like, I'm serving the people that I'm with, and I'm serving myself. It's part of the house. Like I'm benefiting from this just like everybody else. So even though the idea of like I'm giving money because I want to teach them good behavior, that's true. But when it comes specifically to stuff in the house, I think it's better not to give money. Now, if it's some other behavior, like let's say something they go over beyond, if you want to like give them a reward for like getting good grades or something like that, something that's like personal to them, I think it's money is okay. Yeah. What habits should a family or household have to make the home and the child Christ-centered? So, I mean, definitely, like, there's the things that we all talk about, like going to church regularly, reading the Bible, praying, talking to your kids after school and being available to hear what they have to say. You know, sometimes something will happen to the child at school, or somebody will say something. But the child is not going to immediately talk to us about it when they see us. They're going to keep that inside. And then at some point, seemingly randomly, at some point in the evening, it might come out. Okay? And the only time that we're going to have to really have that conversation with them is if we're available to have it. This goes back to the idea of like the being available for our kids. A lot of what we're going to teach our kids about being Christ-like is not necessarily the the formal activities that we do. So definitely like going to church and reading the Bible and praying is something that we should all be doing and encouraging our kids to do. But there's other things, like the child hears something or sees something or something happens to them, and we're there to have that conversation. We invest the time to have that conversation once they bring it up. Because, a lot of times you ask them, how was school today? Fine. Did anything happen? No. But then later on, they'll bring up something. Having the time to have that conversation builds the relationship between the parents and the kid, and also allows us to give them the Christ-like perspective on the things that have happened to them, to help build their way of applying Christianity to the world. Because these other things, like going to church, reading the Bible, and praying, like, yes, these are Christian activities. But having the conversation about how we should think through a problem or think through something that's happened or that's been said is a way for them to see, how do we take this Christianity as a religion, and how do we apply it to the real world, so that it's actually something that's not just a separate activity that we do on one day of the week or we do at a certain time of the day, but it's something that I take with me for the rest of my life. I take it with me to school and all that, and I make decisions based on it, right? So they have to see that in you. Also, if they see that the way you apply it, and again, this is something that they will observe without you even having to try. If you are living it in your own life, then they will observe it in you, and this is something that they will carry with them. Modeling this behavior to them is again more important than giving lectures and guidance and telling them what they should do. Seeing them seeing us do it is very important. So I would say those are the main things. Like, there are the explicit Christian activities that we talk about, and then there's how do we apply it in our life, how do we apply it in the different scenarios and situations. We have to be available so that they can have those conversations with us. How involved should parents be in who their children choose as friends, and how do you recommend a parent get involved? So obviously children, they choose their own friends. Whether we like it or not, they're choosing their own friends. Now, we can limit if there are certain people who are bad influences on them. Like, we can tell them, no, we're not going to take you to their house. I'm not going to let that person come to my house. Yes. But children are going to be, like, if there's a certain person at school and they want to spend time with them, they're going to be at school. They're going to go spend time with them. So the kids are going to gravitate towards certain people. We should be, as much as possible, aware of who those people are and how they spend their time with them. If we the closer that our child is to a person is the closer that we should also be aware of who they are and their parents and whatnot. There's nothing wrong with limiting certain friends. There's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, even though the child wants us to, like, let's say, go have a play date or hang out with a specific kid, take them to their house, we can say, no, I don't feel comfortable with this family, and explain why. Don't just say, no, I don't want to. Just explain why. Like, if there's certain behavior that you see in this child or in their family that is negative and you don't want your child to be exposed to it, you can say, no, I don't feel comfortable with this, and here's the reason. Again, it gives them the ability to reason and to understand that there's a reason behind things. It's not an arbitrary thing. It's not just because the parent said so. There's a reason why the parent said so. And of course, this depends on the maturity level of the child and how much they can understand. But the more that we can explain, like, there's a good reason behind the decisions that we're making, it's good. So, and if you feel like a child is having a negative influence on your child, even in the casual way that they are hanging out together, you can talk to your child and say, I don't want you spending time with this person. I don't want you to hang out with them a lot because I feel like they're having a negative influence, and so on. And so again, like, we rely on our kids to make good choices. If our kids are not with us and they're making poor choices, we try to correct it and try to make them to understand. There are cases where you would speak to the parents, like, let's say if their child is explicitly getting our kids to do things like steal or something like that, we could go talk to the parents of those kids and say, please tell your child to stop, talking to my child about this stuff and like that. Like, that's also possible. It's really kinds of depends on the situation. It depends on the relationship between the children, our relationship with the parents, and so on. It's really kind of a case by case, but definitely we should be aware of who our children have as friends and what influence that they're having on them. How do you balance being like a friend to your child and also a parent? Okay, so in some ways, like, for instance, when we speak about establishing a system of rules and consequences and rewards, of course, this is like a parent. But we should be interested in their life like a friend, right? Like, we should be caring about knowing them, caring about the things that they care about, wanting to see that they're happy and doing things to make them happy like a friend would. We should be spending time with them, enjoying their company, sharing as much activities as we can. But at the same time, we don't cross any lines. So, for instance, the moment that the child does something that breaks a rule, the moment they do something that's immoral, the moment that, like, they say or do something that could be, like, in violation of something, that's when the parent appears, right? Like, okay, no, like, we're having fun and we're having a good time together, but you can't say this, you can't do this, and let me explain to you why, right? So there's not really a like I don't want to say like friend and parent are like two separate things. Like, a part of being a parent is being friendly, right? We want to have, because we want to have good relationship. Good relationship means we're being friendly. But the moment that the child does something requiring discipline, like breaking a rule, crossing a boundary, that's when the parent appears. And the problem that people have, that parents have, is they don't make the parent appear. They're like, oh, we're just having fun and I want to be a friend. And I know that if I say something to the child, they're not going to like it. It's going to ruin the moment and all that. That's fine, right? Because our goal is not to avoid offending the kids. And believe me, the kids are not going to be offended forever, right? Like tell them what they did wrong. If discipline is necessary, give them the discipline, and then you can be friends with them again. Like it's not like it's maybe in that moment they're not going to see you as a friend. In that moment they're going to see you as a disciplinarian. They're going to see you as a parent. They're going to see you as someone who's giving consequences. But the moment that those consequences are done, right, then you're going to be back and be their friend again. So the child respects the parent, but is friendly as well. Like, you want the relationship to be that, like, when the kid comes home from school, he wants to share everything that happened. He wants to play with you. He wants to talk to you. He wants to do this. But he also knows that he can't just use that relationship as an excuse to cross the lines and to break the rules, and know that. And because you're a cool parent and you're a friend, that means you're not going to say anything. Again, it requires a lot of consistency from the parents. It requires them to to always be mindful of what the rules are and not violate those rules, not soften those rules. But at the same time, like, I'm playing with you, I'm sharing with you, I'm laughing with you, I'm doing all those things, investing time with you. That actually makes parenting much easier. When you have a good relationship with your kids are much more likely to follow and to obey, because they know that you care about them genuinely. Do you have any tips on how to keep the long game of parenting in mind instead of getting lost in the day-to-day irritants or struggles? Definitely, like when you read like stories of like Saint Monica and Saint Augustine. You know, Saint Augustine was, as a youth, he was away from God, and his mother, Saint Monica, prayed for him for decades, until he returned, and he ended up becoming a bishop and a saint. This is like a great example of the long game, right, of parenting. Parenting can be very difficult and painful, especially when we see our children going astray and doing the wrong things, and it can be something that causes a lot of anxiety and stress to the parents. Keep in mind that whatever it is, time that you invest in the children when they're young, is you will reap it later, right? Don't be quick to discipline your kids the wrong way. And this, I think, one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is, in order to get the immediate result that they want, they do things that can have a long-term detrimental impact on their relationship with their kids, right? Like, for instance, if every time I threaten my kids aggressively doesn't necessarily mean physically aggressive. It could just be an intimidating way and a yelling way and a way that frightens them, right? Instead of having a conversation, instead of explaining things. Now, some kids, maybe you explain it to them left and right, and in the end, like, they don't get it, okay? And you're going to say, well, I know this is just how it is. This is what's going to happen. But I can still do it calmly, okay? Trying to be aggressive all the time with our kids can have a long-term negative impact on the kids. It can make them afraid of us. It can make them feel like we don't care about them, or we don't love them, or the only thing that works with them is aggression instead of like normal communication. And so those are some things that can have that long-term negative impact, while at the same time it's effective in the moment. Like, in the moment, we got them to stop doing what they were doing. We got them to follow the rule. But in the long term, it can have a negative impact. And this can be difficult because you're already under stress and you're already busy, and you maybe have multiple kids you're trying to deal with at the same time, and it's difficult. That's why every time going into like a parenting situation, like, ask God to give you peace and to deal with it in a wise way, so that you're not always in this mode of stress. And when we teach our children these principles, again, from a young age, it actually makes it so much easier for the parent, because they begin to respond and understand much better than just responding to the aggression. They respond with thinking. And again, it's up to each child is different. There's different maturity levels, and as they grow and their age. But that's the goal we want. We want our children to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And part of that is allowing them to experience the consequences of their actions and making decisions on their own. The moment that you begin to allow the child to make decisions on their own, even if they're bad decisions, this goes such a long way to helping them mature and to actually bringing about balance in this relationship between the parent and the child, because the child begins to take accountability and responsibility on their own. From a young age, give them anything to make a decision about. Like, something that's not going to hurt them, something that is at their level. Let them start making decisions, right? They're going to like it. They're going to like the fact that you're giving them in some kind of independence. Offer them, do you want this food or this food? Offer them, do you want to wear this or do you want to wear that? Offer them, do you want to go here or do you want to go here? The smallest things, right? And when they see that they're able to make decisions, that we respect their decisions, it's going to build their self-esteem. It's going to make them think, like, learn how to think better. And you can help them with the decision-making process. Be like, okay, well, if we go here, then that means you should expect this to happen. If we go here, it means you should expect this to happen. Which one do you want? And then they make a decision. And then when it comes to like following rules, right? Again, it's a decision that they're making. Another thing, that when you make a system and they can think ahead of time, they know what's going to happen. And if you see your kids about to like do something wrong, again, instead of yelling about it, you can say, okay, you know what's going to happen. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. And if you do this, this is what you want. What do you choose? right? And if they choose the wrong thing, then we do the consequence again calmly. Like it doesn't require rage or anger. It's just following through with the rules, and then all these things over time builds the character of the kids, builds the logical understanding and thinking strategies of the kids to help them. My young son is very much interested in girly shows, toys, his mom's makeup, and playing with girls. Should we be concerned, and how should we address it? So children do not all follow the same exact, like they don't all have the exact same likes and dislikes. There's nothing inherently wrong with a doll, for instance, the boy playing with the doll. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Like if it's something that's a toy intended for a girl, that's just because the majority of girls like those toys. But there are girls that like boys' toys, and there's boys that like girls' toys. The fact that he's playing with things or interested in things that are typically from the other gender, in and of itself, this isn't wrong, right? The society goes a step further than this and says, well, because he's playing with girls' toys, and that means he is a girl, right? And that's obviously wrong, right? But the fact that like different people like different things. For instance, like most men, let's say they like sports. I don't like sports. And there's some girls or women that typically, many of them don't like sports, but some of them love sports. So the fact that some people like things outside of the stereotype of their gender doesn't mean anything, right? It's fine, like it's okay. It's only when they start to think that they are that. Like for instance, if your child, because he's playing with the makeup and he's playing with the girls' toys and he's only playing with girls, he starts to think that he is a girl. That's when it starts to become a problem. And so, make sure that as much as possible that he has like a strong male role model in his life to show him like what a man is, and that he is a man. Point out the things that as a male only he can do. For instance, like if he wants to be a deacon in the church, look, it's only the boys that are deacons. Encourage him to be a deacon. So like it's okay if a child at a young age is doing things or has hobbies that are typically outside of the stereotype of that gender. It doesn't mean that there's anything really wrong. Yeah. Yes. So like, if it's something that the child is not going to do it as an adult, don't let them do it as a child. So yes, don't let boys wear makeup or wear dresses or things like that, because that causes confusion, and it's not something that's ever going to be for them, right, moving forward. But the idea that they are, have an affinity for like the toys of a girl, that is not a problem. Yeah. What's the best way to handle? No, I don't want to pray, or no, I don't want to go to church. So, this is again going to depend on the age. When the children are young, everything that they're doing is based on what we're telling them to do. So when they're young, obviously all the family is going to church, and the child can't stay home by themselves if they're young age. And you can explain why we're going to church, why we enjoy church, the benefit of going to church. You can give them a reward after going to church and being good at church, for instance. Like we can go out to eat afterward. We can have some kind of reward that the child likes, and to see that the rest of the family is also going to church, which is also important. Like it can't be that other siblings aren't going or the parents aren't going, but the child is going, and you're forcing them to go. He has to see that we're all going. And same thing with prayer, right? Like everyone is participating in this activity. But as the child gets older, so let's say once they start becoming in high school, they're beginning to form who they are. And again, trying to force a child to do things against their will is ultimately, at that age, it's kind of futile. You still are modeling the right behavior, but when they turn 18, when they move out of the house, whatever, like they're going to choose for themselves wherever it is that they want to go. So trying to continue to force them to do the right thing when they're at that age is not necessarily beneficial, right? Because at that point, like they're almost at the age where you're not going to have any authority of them or very little authority over them anyway. And if they're going to make poor choices, then they're going to make poor choices. So it's better, instead of continually having this fight, is to tell them, look, I disagree with what you're doing. I don't think this is the right way. I don't think this is a responsible way. We're going to continue to do this. We're going to continue to go to church and all that. If you don't want to go to church, you don't have to go. But I disagree with it. And so make the, again, child feel like he has independence. He has the decision-making ability. And like what we said before, there is a positive reward and there is a negative reward. And sometimes the negative is just the natural consequences of your actions. And sometimes it's something that kind of manifests over a long period of time. So you can give the warning, you can make them understand, like if you stop coming to church, here's what you should expect to happen in your life. And we're all still going to continue to go. And sometimes that is enough for the child to kind of decide on their own. And really what they're wanting is, I don't want you to force me to do it, but I kind of know what's right to be done. And so I don't want you to force me to do it, but I want to do it on my own. Now, there are times where the child isn't going to do it on their own, and they're just, if you give them that choice, they're not going to go to church, and that's fine, right? Like, it's not fine that they're not going to church, but it has to be their choice. No one can be forced to worship God. No one can be forced to love God. It's not by force. As a child, your role to them has been to model for them the right way, to teach them the right way. But as an adult, you can't do that anymore. And one of the pitfalls, I think, that parents fall into is they don't realize that their role as parents changes as their childs grow, right? Until the child becomes an adult, you don't have influence on them like before. You can't tell them, do this, do that, forcing them to do it. Like, they're adults now. And your influence on them has been for the last, 20 years of life. That 20 years is where you had the opportunity to mold them, to change them, to teach them the right principles, and now they're out. Once they have reached that adulthood, then you are not going to command them what to do anymore. You're not going to tell them what they must do. They have to take that on their own. But definitely when they're younger, we force our kids to do things all the time. Like our kids might say, I don't want to go to school. Oh, no, you have to go to school. Right? It's not up to you. If once you become an adult, if you decide you don't want to go to college and you don't want to do this and that, okay, that's on you, and whatever consequences come from that is on you, as long as they understand, right? But definitely, as a young child, modeling the right behavior, telling them that we have to go, and giving rewards if they do go, and whether they like it or not, they have to go. But at some point, when they're older, if they don't want to go, we can't force them to go. Any other questions? Ask if you have questions. But that's okay, because like you're going to tell them, you're going to make them understand. Like now, as you're getting older, and you have the ability to make more choices, and there are some things I'm going to let you choose. There are some things that I'm not. The things that I'm not going to let you choose are because you have to do it a certain way for your safety. You have to do it a certain way to be safe. But there are other things that I'm going to give you the choice. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, yes. Okay, what are some of the kinds of choices I'm going to let you make? And you give some examples or something. Like, you're always in control. Like you're always in control. Like, so our kids believe that they're in control, and they want to be in control, and they push to be in control, but you're always in control. You always have the ability to push all the buttons and to change all the things and to give all the punishments, and to, like, it's within your control. Maybe we avoid that because we don't want the conflict, we don't want the fight, we don't want, it's just easier to give them what they want or it's easier just to avoid that altogether, that whole conversation. But like, even if our kids are going to try to manipulate, even if our kids are going to try to use whatever system against us, we're always the ones just having to enforce that boundary. Like this is what I said, and this is what's going to go. You could do whatever you want. You could say whatever you want. I'm not budging. This is what's going to happen. So it's good to start it like with small things. You know, like I said, try the smallest things and to give a choice, but to make them understand. And I think for many children, the moment they see that you're giving them a choice in one area, it's actually going to satisfy that kind of need to choose, maybe making it easier for them to follow in other areas because they know that there's other things that they do have a choice in. And as they get older, they'll have more choices. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Throwing away all the toys, that's a way of cleaning up the mess. Like it's like anything else, right? So you make the rule known. Okay, what is the rule for keeping things clean in the house? That's the number one thing you have to decide, right? So is it that we want to clean up at the end of every day? Is it that we want to have a day where we clean everything? Is it, that the moment I finish playing with a toy, I put it back where it's supposed to be? Like, what is the rule, right? So we define what the rule is. And then you say, okay, here's going to be the reward if we follow the rule. And you're going to evaluate it on a daily basis. You say every day, at the end of the day, we're going to look and see whether you followed the rule or not. If you followed the rule, here's what you're going to get. But if you didn't follow the rule, here's what's going to happen. And you can remind the kids of this throughout the day because, kids aren't necessarily going to remember. So as you see that they're maybe not following the rule, you can say, remember what we talked about? How we said that if you followed the rule, this is what's going to happen. And if you didn't follow the rule, this was going to happen. And just leave them. If they didn't pick up anything, if they didn't do anything, that's fine. Right? Like, okay, you didn't follow the rule. You're not going to get this. And tomorrow, now you're going to have to clean up this as well. Because you didn't do it before the end of the day. And it takes time for kids to get used to this, right? But in the long run, they can get used to it and they can begin to do it proactively because they want the thing that you're offering. So again, having a system of positive and negative reinforcement while reminding them that this is the system in case they forget, because they tend to forget, that can be a motivator. If you find that it's not working, then maybe you need to amplify the negative and the positive reinforcement. Right? Like make the consequences worse and make the positive reward better, right? Until you land on the right combination of things that really gets them to pay attention, Again, it depends on the age of the kids. It depends on what they're able to do. When you have younger kids, you can start with something very much simpler. Like instead of it being like a reward at the end of the day, it could be like, okay, each time you play with a toy, okay, I want you to put it back at the end. And when you begin to see any kind of positive result, you are rewarded immediately, and anytime you see that they didn't do it, you give the consequences immediately. Over time, when the kids get used to this and they see that you're consistent in it, they will begin to change their behavior. Okay, let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We thank you, Lord, for this day. We ask for your blessing in everything that we do, and we ask that you help us to be good parents and to raise our children with wisdom. We ask, O God, for your mercy, and that you grant us forgiveness for all the ways, O Lord, that we have transgressed against you, and that you walk with us, O Lord, and grant us the grace of your Spirit. Through the prayers of St. Mary, Archangel Michael, St. Paul, St. Mark, and all your saints, Hear us as we pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. The love of God the Father, the grace of the only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, the communion and the gift of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you all. Amen.